I was fascinated by her visit to Lansing, and I was wondering, has she returned to Lansing, or have other organizations reached out to her and said, can you do something similar with us? Has she visited other organizations like that?
Sonya is in high demand at the moment. Since the film came out almost 2 years ago, she's been overrun, her and Regina both, with requests, which is why it's really special that they're coming here on the 19th. She's had to slow down on the engagements just because she's almost 93. She'll be 93 in November, and she's still running a business, which is her first priority, as you just found out. So she's not traveling as much, she's not doing as many engagements. However, she has gone back to the prison a number of times, a handful of times, and she's also starting to go to VA hospitals with Sue Ellen in the Midwest, and they've been doing more of that recently. One of our goals for 2019 is to be able to get a copy of our educational package for this film into every single prison in the United States, which I know is a big dream, but if I start the momentum and keep talking about it, it is possible. Another goal is to get it into the hands of all of the Elizabeth Dole Foundation fellows and ambassadors so that they can use it in groups. We're finding that prisons and veteran hospitals, there are certain groups of people who this film really, really resonates with. When Sonya was in the prison, it was the first time that I saw her authentically moved and inspired and feeling like she was actually getting through and making an impact. At the end of that scene, she says, you know, I got it, they got it, I think they really got it. And that was the first time I saw that in her, and it's because she feels like she has a common understanding. Inmates and also veterans, anybody who's been to war and come back, and those guys that are in there, they're all still in, which I just learned recently. The main people who spoke in our film are all still in Lansing. And they understand where she's coming from, and she understands where they're coming from to a certain degree, and it was quite powerful. We did go back and screen the film for them in April of last year, and the one update I can give you that I know about is that CJ, who was the tallest man, who gave her a hug, he had the red hat on, who said, I don't know what I would do if my mother died while I was in here. When we went back in April, he confided in us that his mother had just died recently, and he was thinking about suicide, and he was very distraught and did not know whether he wanted to go on living. And he told us that he thought about Sonya, and he thought, what would my mom want me to do? Well, my mom would want me to start speaking to youth, trying to keep people out of prison, and that she would want me to go on. And he thought about Sonya and her mom and the fact that she lost her mom when she was 13, 14 years old, and that somehow got him through. Powerful. Thank you.
There in the back.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm one of the fortunate people who've actually been to Birkenau and Auschwitz.
Wow.
It makes my heart break. My daughter is a member of one of the churches in the Johnson County area where Sonya has spoken before. And when I told her what I was doing today, she said, has Sonya connected with the Museum of Jewish Heritage in New York City? And has she done dimensions in testimony for the museum?
The film was screened at the museum, I believe in 2016 2016 or early 2017. The Museum of Jewish Heritage did do a screening of the film. We weren't there for it. Anybody can host a screening for the film, actually, and they hosted one. She has not done, I assume the dimensions in testimony you're talking about are the ones that look like holograms that the Shoah Foundation houses. Is that correct?
Actually don't know, but I do know that Sonya would be recording her stories in her voice, like you did with KCUR.
I believe that Dimensions in Testimony is a program where they record over a couple of days, actually. You do interviews for about 10 hours a day. I just went to visit Shoah Foundation recently and learned more about this project. And they do interviews, and then they create a kind of they call it a hologram, although it's not, I guess it is technically a hologram. It's a little creepy and cool at the same time. You're asking a survivor questions, and they've just spent a week recording all of the possible answers. So in a perfect world, they answer you back. And I think because we're losing all of the survivors in our lifetime, I think that's a way of carrying on their message. Unfortunately, I had also thought Sonya would be a really good candidate for that. She's a natural performer. She loves being on camera, unlike the rest of her family. And we had thought she'd be a really good hologram. Unfortunately, it's very, very expensive, and families and donors are paying to make that happen. The Shoah Foundation does not provide funding. They provide the resources and the framework to record it and to distribute it, but they don't provide the funding to do it. And so it's hundreds of thousands of dollars that it's an expensive effort, and we don't have the capacity to do that. But if the opportunity ever came up, I don't think Sonya would turn it down. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a very moving film.
Thank you.
What are your plans or thoughts about spreading the message to schools? Do you have a
Yes.
plan in mind?
We have big plans in mind. Thank you for asking. We have an educational toolkit for this film. You just saw part of it. It has two versions of the film. One is 45 minutes, because a lot of teachers told us that they can't play more than 45 minutes in a classroom. And then we have a 25-page digital companion guide that we created in partnership with the Stan Greenspon Center for Social Justice. And we're coming up with a core standard curriculum guide with Journeys in Film, the same organization who is creating the guide for Schindler's List, that will be out in the next month or two. So we have this package that anyone can gift to a school or organization of your choice, or the school can order it from us directly. And another one of my goals for next year is to try and get the package into every single middle school and high school that we can in the Midwest. We're going to start here and see what's possible after that. But that gives us a few thousand to work on first. But why not try? So yes, if you know any educators or you would just like to underwrite copies of the film to schools in your area, please get in touch with us. It's all on our website, bigsonia.com, and we also have postcards that I think the volunteers are going to hand you on your way out, just as a reminder, but it's the name of our film.com. So we tried to make it as easy as possible. So yes, schools are, obviously, education was our biggest goal since day one of this project, and we can't think of a more important time in our world for the lessons in this film. And so thank you for helping us. We call it the Sonya effect, which is what happens when you get inspired after this film, and anything's possible.
And if I could add that, the Dole Archives, the education program here will be, has access to that material. So if your students are here locally and are interested in visiting the Dole Institute, we've been able to work with Leah to help promote that material and use that material as well, so. Any other questions? Backlit there. If nobody wants to speak right now, I'll ask one, Leah. What was the, if you can describe it briefly, what was this process like for your family of creating this film? And would you have any suggestions? Maybe we're not all filmmakers, but what can we do in our own families to
Well, don't quit
achieve
your
something
day
similar?
job, that's for sure. Gosh, yes, a lot of things have come up in our family. One of the biggest elements that I think people relate to, whether you know about the Holocaust, irregardless of age, gender, race, ethnicity, culture, the one theme that people are relating to more than any other theme in this movie seems to be this theme of intergenerational trauma and spiritual DNA, some people would call it. So the things that get passed down to us from our parents and our grandparents, and the things that we may not even know are in us that come out at some point in your life. Nobody in my family wanted to be in the movie except for Sonya. She's always wanted to be a movie star, and she's the performer. Nobody else wanted to be in the film. We had to convince my dad and Regina and Debbie to be in the movie. I did not want to be in front of the camera at all. I tried to get out of it a number of times, and our team vetoed that. But what we found when we started interviewing the family was that everybody is dealing with the trauma of what happened to Sonya and John in their own way. It was the elephant in the room that we didn't want to talk about, and the one element that it seems that every single person can relate to, because we all have stuff. You know, we all have things that have been passed down that are unavoidable. And so realizing that in my family, when none of us were talking about that ever before, was very powerful and also very traumatic. We've sort of opened up this Pandora's box, and I would say we now all have an understanding in my family, my cousins, anyone in my family and extended family understands now that we're all dealing with this in our own way, and I think that's a good thing. It doesn't mean that we talk about it anymore. And I think that's probably natural because we weren't talking about it before. We're not really talking about our trauma now, but we have a much better understanding, and we've been doing more research about it. And it's very validating for my dad and Debbie and Regina when people see the film, second generation, see the film and reach out to them and say, thank you. Thank you for being vulnerable, because we have some things like that. You're not alone. And that's been the most validating part for my family. And it makes us feel really good, and I know it makes them feel really good, because it's not comfortable to talk about. It's not comfortable. But ultimately, we're finding it's the one thing everybody relates to, and it's really powerful.
That's interesting that you don't want to talk about it within your own family, and then we think about, if we don't talk about it in our families, we don't talk about it
Right.
outside of our families, and the film serves that need so well.
Well, it's difficult putting your entire family on a big screen and then allowing them to be vulnerable on that screen, and you just hope that it resonates. You hope that people get it. You hope that people see that vulnerability as strength and not weakness. And that is what's been happening in the past 2 years since we've been on the road with the movie. And it makes me feel good. It makes me feel like it's worth it, and it's a sacrifice that my family is making so that other families can have some more understanding.
Any other questions out there? Okay.
Have you or have Sonia been able to connect with the Holocaust Museum in Washington?
We have connected with the Washington there's 165 major Holocaust museums all around the world. And of course, that's another one of our goals, is to get the film to all of those museums. But we did connect with the United States Holocaust Museum. Unfortunately, the film is not within their priorities for screening, at least in the next year. That's the response that we got. So some of the places where we had thought this film would actually be the most natural fit have not been the most natural fit. And others are coming to the forefront as better partners. And so we would love for the museum to host a screening of this film, but they know about it, they've seen it, they say they like it, but it's not going to happen anytime soon.
Can we have one here in the middle, or, yeah?
Have you or anybody in your family ever thought about visiting one of the camps that Sonia was at?
Are you a student?
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for providing this experience for me.
Thank you for being here. It means a lot to us when students show up. I don't think you had school today, so you didn't have a choice, but thank you. We have thought about it. Sonia has thought about it. She always said if anybody in the family wanted to go, back to her hometown in Poland or visit any of the camps, that she would go. But nobody in our family ever pushed her to go because we don't necessarily want to go back. I did recently experience a virtual reality program at the Shoah Foundation where they went to one of the camps, and it was so visceral and really did feel like you were there doing the tour. And I know that that's not a substitute for the real thing, but personally, I just don't feel that I want to do that anytime soon. And I don't think Sonia is ever going to go because she's almost 93 and really doesn't want to travel anymore. So she probably will not be going back, although I would be interested to see how she felt about the virtual reality experience. And we may do that at some point if she would go to LA with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A question up here.
Leah, regarding the trauma in your family, has Sonia ever explained or talked about, especially to your dad, Maury, about her being so hard on the children?
That's a good question. When she saw the film, it was the first time that she saw my dad cry. And also the first time that she realized that her children might have had a difficult experience growing up. She had probably put blinders on to actually she did put blinders on to all of that. And it's very difficult for her to watch, even to this day. That part is very difficult for her. I don't know if she ever tried to really explain and listen with her kids, but she does have a little bit more compassion and understanding now for what they went through. In her mind, and she would say this if she was sitting right here, she would start the answer to that question by saying, well, I'm not going to do her accent, but I could, but it's early in the day. She would say, that it's difficult for her to watch, but she would defend it by saying, we gave them everything we could, we did the best we could, we gave them an education, and it makes me sad. I realize now that they did think that they were different, and she can see that now because of the film. I don't know that she's tried to make any amends in a way, but she does have a relationship still with her kids, and she has a relationship with my dad. Some people think because of the movie, Regina says he never came back. Well, he does come to Kansas City for a day or two. He still has the sense of family obligation, and they do talk. Sonia still calls every Sunday, and usually he has to put the phone down because it just keeps going for a long time. But he has about a 48-hour family window, and then it's time to go. There's a lot in that. There's a lot of obligation, and everyone has it in their family one way or another. We all have a mom, different time windows. But yeah, it's just something that's always there. It's a messy relationship, and there's so much tied into it and so many years of trauma and dealing with this that I don't know if it'll ever be wrapped up in a nice bow. But the film has provided a lot of understanding and validation for my dad. Thank
Anyone
you.
else? Up here on the front. Haley,
I can repeat the question too if you want.
here she comes. Right here on the end.
Has your family talked to other Holocaust families to see if they have the same upbringing
Yes.
trauma?
Yes, actually, because of this film, because they weren't necessarily talking about it all the time. They would say that they always knew, when they were growing up, they always knew which kids were Jewish, and if there were survivor families. They knew all the survivor families in the area. And because of the film now, they're getting contacted by a lot of other families. A lot of second generation come to our screenings. And Regina is at a lot of screenings. My dad, comes when he can. And when they're there, a lot of people come up and speak with them. Or if they aren't here, they'll search them out. And so they've met through screening the film and the film being out in the world. They have met a lot of other families, and they feel now that there are so many other people who can relate to their experience. And it's because of the movie. It's because they're talking about it. Whereas people weren't comfortable talking about it before. The movie brings something out in you. It makes you think about your own family, your own history, your own stuff, right? The stuff you don't necessarily want to talk about, or the things you didn't even know were there. Oftentimes after we screen the movie, it becomes a group therapy session, and people tell us all kinds of things. They tell us things they never thought they would say in public because it sparks something. It makes you think about your own life. So the community has grown, without a doubt.
Anyone else? Oh, there's one back there.
Hi, I want to thank you so much for making this movie.
Thank you for coming.
And I don't really have a question. I would just like to
That's okay.
make a comment because you're talking about people's response to it. And I think it's a visually beautiful movie, so well made. But the story is so deeply personal to see this big story shown through one life. What it did for me was to demonstrate our capacity for allowing both darkness and light to live within our lives. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I love that you said that, because that is, I think all of us have the light and dark in us to some degree, right? The percentage is different in people, but I've learned a lot about myself through making the film. And the thing is, Sonya thinks about her trauma and what happened to her every second of the day. We do screenings a lot at schools, and many teenagers ask the question, how does she not think about what happened to her? How does she get through it? And I always tell them, there's never a time she doesn't think about it. She just has found a way to get through it. And she says in the film she stays busy to keep the dark parts away. And that's become a mantra with me and my husband now. We stay busy to keep the dark parts away. I think everybody finds a way to keep the dark parts away, but there's dark and light in all of us. And Sonya most certainly has dark and light, and she's human. We call her a wounded healer. She can heal people because people find their own redemption through her. But she is deeply wounded. And we wanted to make a film that was not putting her on a pedestal to the point of not being human, because she's human after all. So thank you for noticing that.
I would like to know if your family, second and third generation, ever considered your grandma's strictness as a rebuttal of the terrors that she experienced, the lies and evasions that she experienced as a young woman, and that she really expected more of her children than of other children. She expected her children never to lie or shortchange anybody, to be a mensch, to be a light to the nations.
I think tough love is, that sums up Sonya for sure. Although my grandfather, John, was the complete opposite. So Sonya took her experience in the war and translated that into tough love to her kids. John took the experience and found a way to make everything funny and loving. And so they had, my dad, had two different, very, very different parents growing up. I'd say other families of survivors and children of survivors, grandchildren of survivors who we've met through the film and who my family already knew before, had very similar experiences with their moms who'd been through this kind of trauma. Sonya didn't have a mom after she was 13. She watched her mom go to the gas chamber and lost her mom and had nobody to teach her how to be a mom. And I know that when my dad was growing up and Regina were growing up, they didn't necessarily think of it that way. They just thought of it as mom's being, really strict and hard on us, and everybody was scared to ask about all the brutality, as you would be. I don't think it was until they grew up that they realized she's tough on us because of what she went through and because she never had a mom to show her how to be a mom. But we do find a lot of similarities with other survivor families who just wanted the best for their kids, and after what they went through, how could you not? So I get it. But it doesn't make it easy. It's not easy to grow up like that, for sure. Tough love is tough before it's loving.
You mentioned a sister who lives in Israel. Is there contact with the family today? Is that younger sister still alive? What's her story?
So, yeah, the story is too long to put it in the film. We thought about making an animated short just of Manya's story because it's also incredible. Manya survived in the forest, living with the partisans, and met another partisan and got married after the war. They went to Israel. And after what Sonya had been through, she said she didn't want to go to Israel because she was tired of things being difficult. She didn't want to fight. And so she ended up in Kansas City. But Manya is 2 years younger, and she's not in good health. And she does not talk at all about what happened to her. So the family doesn't really even know the rest of Manya's story. Sonya knows some things, but Manya is so traumatized by what happened that she won't talk about it. There's one interview that one of her kids did with her that I've been trying to get a hold of for 7 years and haven't been able to get a hold of it. very different personality than Sonya. I met her one time when we went to Israel, and Sonya and Manya speak on the landline, which is why Sonya's phone bill is astronomical. She has no idea why. But they talk at least once a week, probably more than that, and they are in touch. Manya doesn't speak English, just speaks Hebrew, so it's not possible. The rest of the family doesn't really speak with her. But I'm fortunate to have met her one time.
We have time for one more question.
Always got one in the front. There we go.
I wonder if you talk for just a moment about the tension between being a filmmaker and also a daughter and a granddaughter. That must have been a very tricky position to manage.
My therapy bill has gone up, that's for sure. That's true. I recently gave a TEDx talk about some of the effects that making this film has had on me. And if you're interested in that, it's also on our website. The short version is, it's been very difficult. I think people had told me more than 100 times to never make a film about your family. And for some reason, when we started making the film and it was just going to be a short, it actually wasn't supposed to be about my family. It was just going to be about the shop. And that was my way of drawing that line. I thought, it's about the shop. It's about these incredibly hilarious people and all different kinds of people that come into this shop. That didn't work out so well. And it did become about my family. And as a filmmaker, because this is what I do for a living, it's not a side job, it's the main job. It was really difficult. And fortunately, I have a great team that I work with. And many times I got vetoed. Many times I said, I don't want this in the film, and they said, you have to put that in the film, or we negotiated things. Getting through the film actually was the easiest part for me because it's what I do for a living. And so I could have the camera in between reality and my job. And so I just got through it because that's what I do. It didn't start getting difficult for me, to be honest, until about 2 years ago, when the film was finally done and we had to start screening it and talking about it and reliving it and having conversations that I wasn't having before. When my dad broke down reading the poem in the movie, none of us expected that to happen, and we all looked at each other and said, don't worry, this is never going in the film. And we put it away for 2 years. Never looked at it, never thought about it, until we started editing the movie, and somebody found it. One of our editors found it. He was looking for something else and he found it, and he came to us and said, oh my God, why is this not in the movie? And I said, oh, that's never going to be, that's off limits. We're not putting that in the movie. And they all said, this is maybe the most important scene to get across this whole theme of intergenerational trauma that we're now talking about. You absolutely have to put this in the movie. And I said, well, I'm not asking my dad. And so my husband, who I got married to in the middle of making the film, I married an editor because we had a lot of footage. So he edited the movie, thank God. He took my dad out to breakfast and asked him and said, listen, I know this is uncomfortable, but this is the scene in the film that a lot of people are going to relate to, and you can help a lot of people who are maybe feeling something, and now they have a way to talk about it and relate to it. And my dad, in true my dad fashion, said, well, it really makes me uncomfortable, but I trust you to do the right thing. Because he works with filmmakers a lot for a living. And what do you do with that? We put it in. But I still haven't talked to him about it because it's too difficult. and too painful. So there was a lot of pressure for us as filmmakers professionally to make a great film and finish a great film. Then there's the added pressure of having your family exposed on screen and making them look good and making a film that they're really proud of and that they want to share. And then there's the pressure of them starting to understand our industry just a little bit, enough to want an Academy Award, want to be in every single festival, every single Holocaust museum, every single school, every prison, every veterans group. And there's a lot of pressure in that. But thankfully, they're all proud of the film. They've been able to go to a lot of festivals with us. We were eligible for an Academy Award last year, which was a huge effort on everyone's part to make that happen. And we're just so relieved that they love the film and they promote the film and that they're happy with it and that they hear from people and feel validated. And so I hope that we've done justice to their story, and that feels really good. But I will never make another film about my family, and I promise you that this time. Yeah. So thank you so much for spending time with us, and I'll stay if you have any things that you'd like to ask privately. And again, if you want to help us get this film into the world, just visit our website, and I'm easy to find. We would love your help. This is a really interesting time and a very important time for this film to be out. So thank you.
Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Leah.
Thank you.